Loaded is a top-down multi-directional shoot-'em-up which plays very similar to Gauntlet for the PlayStation 1. There was a Saturn release almost a year later, but that's not the version here on the Evercade, and I've never played that version. The game is, well, it's very 90s. The plot involves you playing psychotic criminals who are escaping from a prison planet to take down Fub, the bad guy. Fub, which stands for Fat Ugly Boy, a former chef with the Space Marines who served up his legs as a meal because, well, I guess he's psychotic or something. There's a larger plot involving him creating a machine which can alter the fabric of the universe and matter and so on and so forth. Kind of reminds me of the Chaos Engine plot. Anyway, your psychotic criminals have to take down Fub. Cue lots of mindless violence. The overall look of the game, the story and tone it goes for is very much like 90s comics for mature readers. When I say mature, with some very graphic and questionable content, I suppose might be the best way of putting it. The character designs were done by comic book illustrators who would do work for DC and 2000 AD. Apparently there was a 12-page illustrated novella created to promote the game, which was written by Garth Ennis, who wrote things like Preacher and The Boys. So that tone that it goes for kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The game does have a distinct visual style, like I said, it's very of its time, as is the music, which features 2 tracks from Pop Beat itself, RSVP and Kick to Kill, which are surprisingly included on this Evercade version. These are remixes from the album Dos Dedos Mi Amigos, which was Pop Beat itself delving into an industrial sound. The remix was later included on the Two Fingers My Friends remix album. The rest of the score of the game follows a similar style. So basically it's industrial techno sounding music. It's very 90s and some of the tracks are quite memorable and all of them absolutely suit the game. I mentioned the visual style of the game. That's more for the presentation that I was talking about. The in-game graphics are 3D, and although it is 3D, you navigate the game on a 2D plane viewed from above. Like I said, it's very much like Gauntlet, and I say it's 3D, character sprites are pre-rendered, and the environments are 3D. There's explosion effects aplenty, enemies explode into lots of blood and gore, and the whole thing has a very dark and dingy look to it. It's safe to say that this isn't one of the PlayStation's best looking games, but everything is functional, has a distinct identity, and certainly does the job it's supposed to. The game is 1 or 2 player, and there are 6 characters to choose from. There's Mama, a large psychotic man who dresses as a baby and can only say Mama. There's Frank, another psycho who has a bag over his head painted in a clown-like manner. Bouncer is a large man with a metal jaw muzzle thing and a heavy weapon. Vox, the only female character in the game, uses music type technology offensively because she's a DJ. Butch is a roided up bloke who wears a dress. And there's Captain Hands, who is a cyborg pirate with large hands and flintlocks. As you can tell, they're big, extreme, obnoxious type characters, larger than life type stuff. I suppose you might say the whole game screams edgelord, but that suits me fine. I'm quite happy with a bit of dark, gritty stuff. In fact, I generally prefer it to cute, cartoony stuff. But anyway, I've told you roughly what Loaded is and the tone of it, but how does it play? Well, not bad actually. It's a good bit of mindless violence that's enhanced by having a 2-player mode. Although it can get a bit repetitive after a while. It's not a deep or clever game, but this that I'm recording now is my thoughts before receiving the Evercade cartridge. This is memory and nostalgia talking. I have played it briefly through emulation, but not extensively. So the next section you hear will be recorded a week or so after when I've completed the game on Evercade.
1 week later.
Yep, I'm recording this a week or so later, and I have just finished Loaded on the Evercade. Now, playing it on the Evercade, the first thing that stood out to me is I'm sure there's been a bit of gamma correction to make it appear a little bit brighter, because it's a rather dark game, and on emulation it's very, very dark. And I played it on emulation a month or 2 back when this cart was announced just to get some footage, and it's definitely brighter than that. and it is largely how I remember it. The differences between the characters are quite significant. I find Captain Hand is easily the best to play as because the way he has the way he's dual wielding flintlocks gives you a better spread of weaponry and a fairly central bias to your firing, whereas many of the characters, well most of them, fire off centre, so sometimes targeting can be a bit of a pain. Now playing it these days, one thing that stands out is you'd imagine if it was developed later it would have had twin stick controls, but this came out nearer the era of Gauntlet. Okay, it's nearly 10 years after Gauntlet, and Smash TV and things like that had come out by then, but it was before the dual analog sticks came to the PlayStation, but it probably would have been possible to use the face buttons to achieve that effect, but the game would have needed to be developed differently because your movement and firing direction go hand in hand. So it's a moot point really. You can strafe and things, which does really help. You'll find yourself using that quite a lot at times, well depending on which character you're playing. I found it less necessary with Captain Hands, but with the others more so. The thing is, as you get further into the game, you get many enemies which move very quickly, and being able to turn quickly and shoot them is essential. And with the slower moving characters it can be a bit challenging. And it can be a very challenging game, depending on the difficulty you put it on. You can be blasting away, causing absolute chaos, lose track of your life, and bang, you're dead before you know it. And lives can disappear quite quickly, as can your limited number of continues. Many of the levels, especially the early ones, are quite long and maze-like, and there's a lot of running around trying to find colour-coded key cards to access new areas. And while many of the enemies do not respawn, there are certain types which are endlessly respawning, which provides sort of a strange sort of counter to the gameplay. It appears to be very fast and frantic and chaotic and wanting you to go all guns blazing, but if you do that you get to die quickly. And then you get areas where you have to be all guns blazing because there's so many enemies and they keep respawning, and yet at the end of the levels it measures you on your accuracy, which is going to be low because you're just having to shoot everywhere to tackle these enemies which are coming at you from all directions and spinning around you faster than you can move. And you have ammo limits of a sort. If you run out of ammo you just do a very small amount of damage, and you get pickups which will boost your damage, and when you die you'll drop them and a couple more will spawn when you die and you'll be able to pick those up, but they will depower you. On later levels you really feel the difference. Trying not to lose your lives and really managing those health pickups you find here and there is kind of essential to succeeding in this game. Fortunately, as I mentioned, there are a few difficulty options. You can make it a fair bit easier for yourself, and another option is to use the cheat codes, which you should be able to find on the internet fairly easily, but I would recommend playing it as it's meant to be played and getting the satisfaction out of it. Well, maybe with a bit of save state abuse to avoid your frustration of having to redo levels too much. But hey, whatever, you play your way. So overall, I do think it is a decent game. It can be quite repetitive, but taken in small doses, a level at a time, having a bit of a blast, can be a lot of fun. It's also fun in multiplayer, but even in 1995 it was considered something of a throwback gameplay wise. Of course, this is in the era of Doom, and essentially it plays much like a top-down Doom with multiplayer. Although Doom did technically have multiplayer, but this isn't a Doom review, so moving on. So what was I saying? Yeah, it's a decent game, your mileage may vary, but if you're in the mood for some mindless violence, it's definitely worth a play. To place it on my overall ranking of every Evercade game list, I would have to place it above Hummings, but below Roger Armour Force. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm not entirely sold on my placing here. I've been back and forth quite a bit, but as I mentioned in another recent video in this ranking listing, I do see a little bit of tidying coming up at some point. But that's something for another day, and that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.